Neurodiversity time here again, 10 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time, UK. Every single week, LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook. We got our life everywhere. You can't get enough of us, right? Oh, you have too much.
Too much there.
Too much. Either way, we're there. We're turning up whether you want us or not. You missed us last week because there was a very special event going on. ADHD Foundation, Neurodiversity Charity was doing an incredible event. I missed it because I had to do something for my daughter and it was tricky. I couldn't shift it, but that is the reality of life, right? That's what kind of happens. But everybody else had a great time, so I kind of enjoyed all the images and pictures. But if you missed us, that was why. But let's get on with the conversation today. We are blessed, privileged, really happy to have Lee Chambers join us today. And Lee, you just go and find him on LinkedIn, and he is smashing one glass ceiling after the next. He is smashing it generally. I love his content, and I got to meet him recently as part of a LinkedIn creator piece of work as well, which was amazing. Lee, you've got the floor. Tell people who you are, what you do, as if they don't already know.
Hey, morning.
Good morning, everyone. So yeah, Lee Chambers, run a workplace wellbeing business. Before that, ran a tech business, psychology by background. Live in the Northwest, very broad. But yeah, always kind of pushing back against challenges, always trying to build some awareness, but turn that awareness into action. And yeah, just ready to rock it with you this morning.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And great to hear you. So one of the things we're trying to do in this community, and there's lots of people are turning up, so have a good morning to you all. It's lovely to see you put things in the chat, is really to think about our well-being, all of our well-being. You know, we are a community, and one of the things I see, and it worries me at night at the moment, there's lots of things that worry me at night, but one of this is we're great and enthusiastic, you know, like, and then I see people going, you know, so that burnout. So we go enthusiastic, we say yes to everything, and then burnout. What do you think? What's your experience of that and supporting, you know, people, and then actually everybody chip in what your experience is, well, because it does worry me how we ensure that we look after each other, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an important point and something that I obviously have like personal experience of, but also from the wider community too. And fundamentally, we are pushing back against a system that has been built around a typical world. And that means we already face a level of resistance that we kind of live with, and a level of inequality that exists within our everyday. So the institutions that are supposed to protect us, the education system that's supposed to teach us, you know, we face resistance in all of those, which kind of weathers against our own well-being just subtly over time. And then add to some of the challenges that we can have. If we look at the statistics, we know that well-being within the neurodivergent community, it's scoring just over 2 out of 5. Like it's very really challenging, very challenging well-being reported scores, and obviously incidence and precedence in the community is really high too. I mean, we need to support each other. We're really pushing forward. We do have what we could say is a movement, but all movements become fractured and splintered as they grow as well.
And we've seen that, haven't we?
Yes.
We've seen sort of infighting, a bit of meanness as well, sort of in a way. You know, if we can't support each other, how are other people going to support us? Especially if we're quite sensitive. I think on the whole, we're a pretty sensitive bunch for the things you've said, Lee, that, you know, past experiences, we're more likely to be bullied in school. Our self-esteem could be a little bit rocky, you know, and then we can be horrible to each other, right?
Yeah.
What's that about? Theo, did you want to say something?
I was just going to say, it seems what I tend to get a sense of as well is that it's my well-being is like more important than anybody else's. It like supersedes, and therefore it's not just my well-being, but my lived experience is more important than anybody else. So sometimes I get the sense of that, and in a community of people that may hurt or may feel that they have been subject to being marginalized, being system impacted negatively, being treated poorly, that then I think for historically, and this plays into the medical paradigm around broken need fixing, we've fallen into a trap of we are broken, and therefore that becomes like the rhetoric. And the problem is we do need to look after ourselves before we can look after anybody else. But if we're looking after ourselves at the cost of anybody else, then that's where I fear it has about it. And somebody is drilling outside.
Yeah. No, I know.
Martin's just making the comment, if one of us suffers, we all do. And I think, I think it is about being sensitive to the impact. We can be critical, but we need to be kind as well,
Yeah, I think one of the things that I see is that in the passion to make a difference, firstly, people don't always appreciate their own interoception and really monitor, how they're getting on. Like, I have a chart on my wall here, and obviously I could spin the webcam around and you can see it, but I have to monitor my energy levels to know how much I've got to be able to push towards things on a daily basis. And I can see when the trend starts to dip that I have to manage what I do, and allow myself that time to kind of come back up. That in itself is a challenge, and I've had to build that self-awareness over years. But obviously, when you're passionate about something, it's easy to kind of just suppress that kind of feeling, because you're doing something that's meaningful, you're doing something that's purposeful. Really, a lot of neurodivergent individuals feel like it's time we change the world, and we change the world together. But changing the world is such a massive task, and the sad reality is when you start to see people fall into arguments where actually they are not only kind of damaging their own well-being, but they're damaging well-being of the people they're arguing with as well. And sometimes, again, communication is very typical, and we're not always able to see, especially because neurodivergent individuals are so different as well. Our lived experience is just one dimension of it, and sometimes we can feel that is a version of the truth that actually is only our version of the truth as well.
And I think there is I think we have our own responsibility. So, I like your energy barometer, because I think sometimes, and that's something I've had to learn over the years, which is something might have happened 6 to 12 months ago that's filled I use a stress bucket as a sort of metaphor for that. And 6 to 12 months ago, something's happened, a major life event's happened. And why today do I feel like I do? Why is it now that I'm not coping? And how do I feel when I'm not coping? Learning those signs when things are starting to go like your bucket's full, rather than waiting for it to all overflow, And I think we need to do that with each other. So to help each other to become generally more self-aware, that we recognize, I know my sleep goes a bit off, I get my neck, I get headaches. There are signs that I know, right, these days that I need to just pull back, right? And I think we all need to share that as a community, is that self-awareness to help people, that they don't get into that spot of that, because I see that up, crash, burn, up, crash, and it's so damaging. It's damaging to your self-esteem and your confidence, and you have to, and we're horrible at saying no to things. We really are. I think it's that bit you said. We come from a place where the past has been difficult. It's been challenging. We're not sure about who we are and our self-confidence. So we better say yes. Because if we don't, then people might criticize us or think we're less than,
Yeah, and rejection is difficult depending on, your kind of, we all have a kind of a level of rejection that no human likes rejection. But for some of the community, rejection is incredibly difficult.
Very.
And we kind of must to survive. And, sometimes those boundaries that we have to try and create are actually quite challenging, because we have that masking flexibility to sometimes flex boundaries beyond what are healthy for us as well. And it does present such a challenge, because especially as, we kind of start to hit more of a world where we can start to find our identity beyond the masking, as things become a little bit more neuro-inclusive, especially in spaces where we do feel safer, more psychologically, to do so. We start to get clear on who we are, but also there's a process of, when I got an adult diagnosis, I kind of refer to it as being both liberating and frightening. And I had like an element of grief before I had an element of freedom.
You see that grief cycle, don't you? Of sort of anger, different emotions. It really is like a grief cycle, I think, for lots of people when they get diagnosed,
Yeah, and it creates reflection points and rumination points.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to delve into that past and unpack aspects to kind of get a newer understanding of how we can actually be, authentically ourselves. Which
you're saying authentically ourselves. I think we've got to be cautious. I'm writing something at the moment all around being your authentic self. So it's pressed a button for me.
Yes.
Because I think the challenge is, what does that really mean, right? Because there are boundaries. If we go authentic self, and that means I can be as rude as hell to anybody because that's me and I'm just going to be it. We've got the consequences of that, which is you could hurt somebody, So do you want to be, what does that mean, really? Do you know what I mean? Where are the boundaries of behavior that doesn't mean you can just say what you like when you like it?
Yeah, and I feel that sometimes kind of authenticity can be weaponized.
It can.
As a way for me to be exactly how I want to be, not necessarily how I am.
No.
And, we all have our own self-concepts. And I think that, especially again, when you get an adult diagnosis, what you end up doing is you end up going into your past and trying to unpick what was me masking and what was me trying to be myself.
I agree.
And that's quite an intensive exercise. It's quite scary. And the truth is, the world will still say, "Oh, you turn up and be who you are, bring your whole self to work," but not that bit.
That one as well. These are sort of, it's like, we're on a journey. These are phrases that people bandy around, but I'm not sure what they actually mean, and I'm worried about, because where people have brought their authentic self to work, they've lost their jobs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when people go, stand up, say who you are, you need to be who you are. We're in a situation in companies and organizations where people are not ready for some of that stuff. And if you do, you've got to be careful of the ramifications as well. And then if you do that because you're proud and you're pleased of who you are and you've come to terms with who you are, then you lose your job. Wow. That's a real, that hurts, doesn't it? It really does. I don't have answers to this, but I think our community is trying to measure that. And we've got to be careful about companies saying, bring your authentic self to work, because if other people don't understand what that is, it could be damaging. It's about those engagement pieces. It's finding allies, isn't it?
One of the biggest challenges before Theo jumps in is that if you go from, pretty much fully masking to fully yourself, other people feel like it's a tidal wave. People feel like you suddenly switched a button and you changed.
When you've hidden it, been hiding it, you're hiding who you really are. Well, have.
You've not been. What's the people start to say? Who is the real you? Yeah. Was it the real you that I knew, or is it the version you are now? What? And I suppose because awareness of masking is so low, people might actually think the more you become who you feel most comfortable in internally, might actually be you acting.
Yes.
And creates confusion and dissonance in other people who don't get it.
So you've got like multiple players in the play. Who are you today? Today I am. So
I interviewed yesterday 2 people, a manager and an employee. She had undiagnosed, or she's autistic. We're struggling for the word. She's autistic, and she didn't know. Right. And through these experiences of the 2 of them working together, he realized, because his wife's a teacher and he was mentioning some of these things, and then he eventually plucked up the courage to ask her, because he cared for her. It was her first job out of university. She had first forestry at Bangor University, one of the best universities for this type of degree. And basically what happened is he started to support her at her masking, and she was getting seizures. And she said in the interview, I get seizures. So he knew about that, but the seizures started to get worse. And one thing that he researched is that seizures are more common in girls who are autistic, right? And what happened is they went on a journey together. Now, the amazing thing is she no longer gets seizures, right? That's the long story short, which is mind-blowing. But
I can tell you what seizures she's got then afterwards.
Okay, yeah. No, because he said the confusing thing about the seizures was he's a rugby player, cricket. He'd seen a lot of seizures in the past, and these did not reflect what he saw. So that was confusing for him as well. But the really fascinating thing for me is when we talk about masking and lifting a mask, one is young people are still developing who they are. So that's a tricky one. You're asking them, if they come into the workplace to remove their mask because they know they're autistic, then wait a minute, they haven't even developed who they actually are. I think about who I was when I was 20. I'm just about getting in my 40s to who I'm now. Like, I think I might now know who I am. And I don't know if that's the advocacy work and everything else, or just that's like around this age, you kind of
an evolution, isn't it?
Or you just know who you are, one or the other. I don't know what. Not many people do that, right? But it's it's that thing that happens, right? At some point in your life where you really know who you are. But this two people, the big thing that happened is he started to realize that he was masking as well, because he was this big burly rugby player, cricket guy, tree fella, when we realized actually he's a very sensitive soul. And he was telling her, it's okay for you to cry. It's okay for you to need time out. It's okay for you to be yourself. It's okay for you to tell me you don't know what to eat tonight, or you're not sure whether you've showered in the last week. All of that is okay. And then he was like, but I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. So when we talk about taking the mask off or connecting to our well-being, right, we're not just talking about the ND community. Are we all right? Are we ready for everybody starting to go, well, maybe I'm going to be a bit more of myself? And sometimes, like we said, that will be good. That will be the big burly guy going, actually, I'm quite sensitive and I've got these kids and I'm caring and I do a lot of chat and or it could be, actually, I've been like pushing down all this, pent up aggression and anger and I need to go on a journey of letting that out. So I find that fascinating. It's not just about me. I am. It like the impact of this will go across teams, organizations.
Yeah, there's a very intersectional aspect to it, Theo, where firstly, kind of the mental health and well-being awareness that has been generated. I mean, 10 years ago, we didn't talk about this kind of thing. And now we started to get some level of awareness around it, but the support systems and structures are still, in their infancy or have not been invested in, and like the prevalence is increased significantly, just in the general population of people becoming more aware, but also becoming, really being impacted by numerous facets. There's also the consideration that, I think everyone is on an awareness journey somewhere. And also, when it comes to understanding who you are, it's often the experiences that you go through that help you and support you to do that, as they kind of gradually chisel away at you. But it can take years to have that. And I think my struggles at university were, so much of them were focused around this idea that, you make an adolescent adult transition, so you're supposed to kind of know who you are by now. I just didn't.
But most people don't. Your brain's changing hugely between sort of 11 and 25. If you're neurodivergent, it continues to change. It's not surprising that we're not sure who we are. But I think that's one of the things, is sort of being able to talk about this a bit more openly and be honest to say, sometimes I struggle, and that can be really hard just to vocalize that. And you're rightly, it's young men. We're seeing, men talking about their mental health far more than we did a generation ago. People wouldn't have talked about it. We're seeing it talked about in the workplace. It is all we only got one brain, so it's actually about us all. We don't have a neurodivergent mental health brain and a men neurotypical, in that sense of the world around us has an impact on how we respond and what's happened to us in the past as an effect. The other bit is, I suppose, how you repair when you're having challenges, and many of us will have had that through our lives in different ways, is learning and celebrating the fact that maybe you've gained resilience as well. So there is taking something positive from some of those times sometimes is helpful to go, how have I grown? Theo's saying he's now an adult, so that's good, Theo.
Yeah, well, I think it's powerful, Theo, when you share stories of, your journey from, being a teenager and some of the judgments that you faced. And interestingly, we all have the capacity to kind of grow through the trauma that we faced. And if you look like deeper into the ND community, you realize that we've all faced a fair amount of trauma, those adverse childhood experiences. And, those are kind of shifted through into adult life in a world that generally invalidates you because you don't fit the typical norm. And systems and structures are built around that. So you spent your whole life being bounced out of things. And there are some challenges around, feeling like you can attach and some of the traumatic elements too. But it's also looking, and for every individual that I meet, I see the adaptability and resilience that has been fostered because of that. And it's quite often that adaptability and resilience which drives the movement.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's like, this has happened to me and I'm going to go for it now because I want this to change. Is that sort of energy? And I think it's that balance between being energized and being enthusiastic and not getting exhausted by it, and that having a damaging effect. And that in the community, I see a bit of that going on where people are really going for it full whack because they've had those experiences. We're here because we've had personal experiences of a whole variety of things. I think about my teenage years, my late teenage years, early 20s. If I'd known or understood, it would have made a complete difference.
One thing I think you probably see, Amanda, and I see this as well, especially for women who are diagnosed in the 30s and 40s, is suddenly that diagnosis, it allows them to take the handbrake off. It allows them to literally release all that suppression.
Yeah.
And that's incredibly powerful, because if I look at the neurodivergent women that I know, if they sat around the table at like the G7, like most of our problems would be solved as a species.
Oh, I agree. Listen,
you know,
you there, Lee. We could save the world. We really could. I mean, it's an interesting thing because I'm just writing the reflective piece at the moment about the authentic self, and I was reading around perfectionism, right? And there is and I think this is perfectionism is a problem, right? Because if you can't get and I was reading an interesting research paper looking about perfectionism and prevarication. So in people who get ADHD, often we can't get off the starting blocks, And I think that amongst our community, we have a high level of we set a high standard for ourselves. Yeah. Sometimes we can't reach, so we're always disappointed in ourselves. We're never quite good enough.
Yeah.
And I wonder whether those perfectionist traits are really damaging for us. And maybe that's because of our past of we never quite did what others wanted us to do as well.
Yeah, and I think if I look at it, Amanda, what happens is in that particular scenario, our floor becomes our ceiling.
Yeah.
And we become trapped by our own kind of expectations and the reality that perfection isn't attainable. But also that it not only does it feel that then our floors are ceiling and we've got no space to move.
Yeah.
But it also stops us being able to see progress.
Yeah.
That incremental small progress that's so valuable to being able to celebrate that and understand what we've gained rather than looking at the gap to where we want to be.
I agree. I think that's a really good point, is that sometimes when you're in the middle of the weeds, you can't see actually where you've come from, where you are now. Wow, amazing growth. But we're so overwhelmed, we can't actually see it. So I think that's and I love that. Yeah, our floor becomes our ceiling. Is that your quote, Lee? Because I'll be quoting you.
That is amazing. I love that.
That's how I just see it in my head.
It's great. I'm going to quote Lee Chambers said, right? Our floor becomes.
It's there, and we've locked it down. We're going to have images of it and everything.
You copyright it today, Lee. All right.
Yeah. I just want to a number of points there that I'm picking up on that made me think when we're talking about girls, women. I think about my daughter in the future, and I think about the challenges, and I think about masking and everything that we've just discussed there. And we link it back to well-being, Lee. If we think a lot of people, right, will not just go into work, not just now run their own businesses, not just feel like they're failing every day because the floor, the ceiling, right? But also we have relationships, we have families, we have maybe husbands or wives and children. And somebody posted something the other day about being an autistic dad, and you no longer have space to be autistic, like almost like you can't look after your own well-being because you can't say to your kids, Like at night when I'm trying to get my daughter to bed, I can't, well, I do actually start to say it now. Last night at 9:30 when I still couldn't get her to bed, I said, Bethan, it's not just your well-being, it's mine. And I'm struggling at the moment, and you're struggling, and you're not going to sleep, and I've not eaten yet. And we ended up hugging. And I said, I love you, but you need to understand this is two-way. It's not just all you. Now, this kind of thing that we have to do as human beings to mask, we are doing as people, leaders, whatever you want to call us within the space, right? Advocating. Yeah. I saw Christine and Paddy McGuinness on TV, 3 autistic children struggling, and she turned around when she got that public diagnosis, if anybody saw it, and when live on, or what, live, but on the TV said, Paddy went, oh, you know, he was kind of reeling about it. And then she basically said to him, Paddy, I've always masked with you. And like, just thinking about everything we've just discussed on women and showing your authentic self or whatever it is, like that, the reality in that relationship with 3 children, a life together, one partner telling the other when they got the diagnosis and realization of they are normal, right? They're not normal. They are typical in their life and world.
In their life, yeah.
But to tell their partner, I've not been me with you ever. Now think about that concept for every single person who works in the community, their families, their connections, their friends. How many of us has maybe never felt like we've been, not just us at work, but us full stop? And then and I'm seeing so many people, relationship, everything are breaking down, people saying stuff they wish they had, like, I know that, sorry, I'm like, but this is the reality of it, right, Lee? So I'm going to pick this boulder up I've just created and just kind of throw it to you to get your thoughts.
Yeah, so I mean, it's such a big thing. It sits alongside self-care being perfect out in the world, how it's projected back to us. Yeah. It sits alongside, you know, very typical relationship standards. Like, it's still expected that if you kind of look out at the world and think, I want to educate myself on relationships and how to, you know, form, you know, romantic relationships, friendships, workplace friendships, and you look, it's all based around typical communication, typical social, you know, reciprocation. And if you to go out and actually try and learn about it, you will learn a system that makes you mask.
But we're all masking to an extent.
To an extent,
we're all masking to an extent. You know, I think as women, if we go sort of intersectional, if we were women going into the workplace, you know, I remember going into meetings and I needed to wear heels. I didn't want to wear heels. I needed to wear a dress that I looked corporate. You know, I had to have that. Yeah, you know, do you know what I mean? Exactly. You had to have that, and you need to behave in a certain sort of way. And I think we all do that in different settings and it's a survival mechanism, and it's a circle, isn't it? Because that's the way people expect you. So that's the way you behave. That's the way you behave because that's why people expect it. And the pressure on you, and we do that as parents, you know, there's an expectation of how we sit and eat at meals and how we, you know, and the pressure comes often from family members around us that says, you're not doing it the way, you know, we did it. And then we mask in lots of ways, partly to fit in the school gate, partly to fit in, you know, it's been a survival mechanism, because if you don't fit in, you fall out. And if you're fallen out, you're out of the cave, you're in the, you know, in the sticks and the wild. And it's broadening what normal is. Our normal in our family is not anybody else's, I promise. You know? Do you know what I mean? We're a hugely neurodivergent family. That's my normal, right? But it's about making people aware that that's okay to do those different things. And it goes back to what is perfect. How do we perceive perfection? Are we designing ourselves to fit in? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's complex, and there's a beauty in the complexity.
Yeah.
I mean, I just try and go through life, ultimately trying to understand and become self-aware of who I am, become more aware of how my actions impact others, and really try to, I suppose, amplify the care and the compassion that I have for the world. Because if there's one thing, you know, that is something that I feel very heightened within. And I think that's, if you look at some of the the typical misconceptions and myths around being ND. So many of them are, based off just, again, like one dimension. It's not a spectrum, it's a prism. And
it's 4D, if there is such a thing. Is there such a thing as 4D?
Yeah. Well, yeah. We can have as many dimensions as we want, Amanda. Yes. But more than ever, I think, we have to look after each other as a community. I think that, if we're going to, all movements can make change, but movements require that kindness. Yes. And I think, like Ella says, the world isn't binary.
No.
We might code things in zeros and ones, but as humans, we are every single combination of numbers you could ever imagine and create. In fact, we created numbers. Humans did.
Yeah.
So,
No, I agree. And I was doing something. I was looking at the number of different factors of different variations we could be just based on 6 different neurodivergent types and then subtypes. And it came to 1 million. That was just that. That didn't include excessive anxiety, epilepsy or anything. So we are hugely, it didn't include, it's millions, isn't it, of different variations. I think what you've said is really important though, Lee. We've got to be kind, compassionate and care about each other, because if we don't, what is the community all about?
Yeah, and there's just one, suppose, final thing that has been quite important on my journey, but I feel is important for everyone to consider, is that we are always going to be ourselves, our biggest experiment. And because we are all bio-individual and unique, what works for one person's well-being might not necessarily work for yours. Yes. And we live in a world where, they say, right, okay, so be mindful. And that is about being still and meditating. That works for some people. For other people, their mindfulness is incredibly active, incredibly creative. That's when they are in the present moment. That's when they are. And it's like, self-care isn't what it's sold to you as. Self-care is an experiment to find what helps you care for yourself, what re-energizes you, what creates a resonance within you. Because there's a massive beauty in being unique. But we've actually got to experiment to find what that is, to find what doesn't work for us. Yeah. But also to find what does.
And I think that's lovely. It's the honesty to say that it's experiment. We're doing a big world life experiment, aren't we, really? And all we can do is work out the bits that work better and avoid the bits in the future that haven't worked so well, and we're all going through that, aren't we? We're all still on this overworked word, a journey. But thank you, Lee. I think your words are wise. They really are. And thank you for what you're doing in the community and outside the community as well. We appreciate everything you're doing. We really do.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to take away your phrase and quote you heavily.
Forevermore. I'm going to live by that. Whenever I'm feeling like I'm really struggling to get over it, that just thinking about that concept, that the floor is becoming my ceiling. It's like, wow, like when you just think about it.
It's that pressure.
I can't even put my one foot in front of the other. How am I going to climb the mountain? It's just
So thank you, and we'll definitely have you back again for more wise words. Thank you very much, and thank you to everybody this morning. Theo, did you want to come in?
Yeah, just going to say thank you everybody for joining us. Another great session, and you can find this on your podcast host of choice, because I upload it, as well as being able to rewind and watch it as a LinkedIn Live on LinkedIn or on YouTube or on Facebook as well on my channel, Neurodiversity with Theo Smith. Thank you. Have a great weekend, and we shall see you again next week, same time.
Thank you. Thank you, Lee. Thank you very much.